listening to The Ones Who Succeed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your pods. I'm Campbell Barron, or at Campbell J. Barron on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Welcome to the program. In the world of tech entrepreneurship, it's safe to say that age doesn't really matter. Unlike 40 years ago, where teenagers starting a business would most likely be laughed out the door by investors, in 2020 there are enough examples of young, successful founders that one could make an argument that starting a business during your youth is not only no longer detrimental to your success, but perhaps an asset, especially in the technology world. And this fact that you can thrive as an entrepreneur at a young age has always interested me. As a result, I am very excited about today's guest, Aanikh Kler, a 22-year-old entrepreneur that pretty much followed that exact young founder trajectory described at the top of the show. Today, he's the co-founder of a venture-backed startup called TrueFan, a social media intelligence platform that has raised over $1.2 million in venture funding, though the $500K seed round of the company was raised before Aanikh and his co-founder hit legal drinking age in the US. However, Aanikh's entrepreneurial journey started back when he was 15. This is actually when I first heard his name on a show called Dragon's Den, which for my fellow Americans is the Canadian version of Shark Tank. Needless to say, Aanikh's story is really inspiring, and his perspectives on startup and tech are refreshing, and as soon as I launched Season 2 of the pod, I knew I had to have him on the program. Aanikh is originally from Vancouver, but now calls Toronto home, where he joined this program via Zoom. This is The Ones Who Succeed. I'm Campbell Barron. I hope you're having a great Wednesday. My conversation with Aanikh Kler starts now. So, for the people who don't know who you are, or maybe they haven't seen that Dragon's Den episode, or just in terms of don't know what TrueFan is yet, I'm sure they'll hear about you soon, but who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so my name's Aanikh Kler. I am a 22-year-old, entrepreneur. I built my first app when I was 14 years old. It was a ringtone app for iPhone and Androids called Under the Radar Ringtones. 20 cents on every download went to free the children. I was on Dragon's Den when I was 15 years old, or I think 14, and then the episode aired when I was 15 or something like that. I can't remember. But no, I was the youngest social entrepreneur to ever receive funding in the history of the show. And then the app ended up hitting number 2 on the iTunes store in Canada and top 10 in many other countries across the world. And then now what I've been building for the last 2.5 years is a social intelligence platform called TrueFan. And what TrueFan is it's essentially a data analytics platform that wants to help businesses of all sizes make data-driven marketing decisions.
And I'm really intrigued by TrueFan, and we'll get to all of that. So part of the reason I wanted to have you on the show was just because anyone who's super young and is already successful and on their way is just generally someone I want to meet and someone I think is really inspiring to a lot of my listeners. It tends to be a younger audience. And so talk about the Dragon's Den experience. We kind of just went over that. Sure. And I think first comes the first thing I want to talk about is how did you get into app building in general and developing these iOS apps?
For sure. So I think kind of to answer that question, I have to share a bit of a story previous to that. So
yeah, of course.
My mom is an absolutely incredible, extraordinary woman, and she believed a lot in experiential travel and kind of learning through experience. So when I was, I think 13, I got to go to Cambodia. And Cambodia is a beautiful country. Angkor Wat is one of the 7 natural wonders it's one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world, pardon me. Mm-hmm. But Cambodia is also incredibly poverty-stricken. And when I was in Cambodia, I saw this girl who was selling bracelets, and she had probably the best entrepreneurial spirit I've ever seen in my life. The way she was interacting with, my family and my friends and everyone who was on the trip and trying to sell these bracelets, I was honestly blown away. So I came back to Canada and I said, okay, if I want to help people in this circumstance, incredibly intelligent people, but don't have the, resources, the opportunities the way that I do being born in Canada, how can I do that? And at the time, I got an iPod Touch when I was 10 years old, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I thought it was like Tony Stark touching this thing.
Yeah.
Right?
No
and
camera,
then,
right? No camera?
Exactly, yeah, no camera. Yeah. And you could touch it, and I was like, oh my God, I'm opening all this stuff. So I was fascinated with apps, so I thought that would be the best way for me to connect with people all across the world, was through that little kind of square on your phone. So that's kind of what got me to the idea of creating an app, was the fact that I was so fascinated by it. And then I also just thought that, apps were such a young thing. Like, my parents at the time, they were still on their Blackberries. They weren't really interested in iPhones or apps very much. So I thought it was something that kind of fit into the spirit of what Under the Radar was trying to be, which was an app built by a teenager for teenagers.
Incredible. And the concept of the app, I think, is very clever, essentially. For the viewer, how I picked up on it is essentially this ringtone that is at such a high frequency that elders or adults can't hear it. And and that was I think you did the demo with Kevin OLeary, and I thought that was quite funny. And when you're pitching to these dragons, and I guess the equivalent is sharks in the U.S., but this was in Canada. I mean, I've met with some quite interesting entrepreneurs, and I wasn't asking them for money. I was interviewing them, and I was terrified, especially when I started. And you're asking them for money. You're pitching your business. You hope your app doesn't crash. What was that like at 14 or 15? And how did that experience go? Were you not nervous at all?
Oh, I was super nervous. So the funny thing too is like, and this isn't any knock on Dragon's Den as a TV show, but TV is very much a hurry up and wait type thing. So I got to the studio at 7:30 a.m. I didn't pitch till 4 p.m. But throughout the day, they're like, okay, get ready, you're going to go next. And like, okay, never mind, someone else is going. So there's so many times during the day I had to like psych myself up and be like, all right, like I'm going to do this. And they're like, okay, no, you're not doing this for another hour. And you're like, okay, deep breathe, God. Center yourself. And I was the last person to pitch in that day. Kevin actually wasn't even able to stay the whole time because he had another TV show called The Lang and OLeary Exchange, which was when they talked about stock, and that filmed at 5. So he stayed for half an hour of my hour-long pitch and then left halfway through, which was crazy interesting to me as well. Like literally they told me, like, by the way, Kevin's going to leave. It's not a knock on you. He just has to leave half an hour in. So he's probably going to talk more at the start. I'm like, great. I love when, Kevin's the one, because he's, he was known as the harder, kind of more
Mr. Wonderful. Yeah.
Exactly. And, I was able to do the demo with him and it was great. But they put the boom mic like on my chest. Mm-hmm. And I thought that they could hear it, because as I was walking down the steps, you kind of, Dragon's Den's different. You walk down the steps and around the corner versus Shark Tank, you kind of come through the boardroom doors. Yeah. I actually thought the mic was picking up my heartbeat, because it was like so loud. It was like I couldn't hear anything else. I was like walking down the stairs and I couldn't hear my feet. It was just like boom, boom. So it was super intimidating, man. But I think I practiced that pitch 1,000 times. So it's like, I kind of liken it to like elite athletes. They've shot so many free throws that in the clutch, they're doing muscle memory. And for me, my goal was to try to get the pitch to a point where it could be like muscle memory of presenting. And when I got in that moment, and I was doing well, and I saw the faces of them of like being interested and kind of being excited, I think that gave me the momentum and the positive energy I needed to be able to continue through.
Yeah, and I, to be fair, I probably saw maybe 8 to 15 minutes of it. And one of the things that was interesting when talking to Mark, these pitches could last for, he said, 1 to 3 hours. Right? Yeah. And it sounds like yours was more than 15 minutes. And so it's all about editing it down. And that's just a lot of time just to be sitting with these people, kind of trying to convince them to invest in your business. And so you connected with one of the dragons really well, Arlene. She funded you, and then there was this very uplifting moment when she presented you the check at your school. You're from Vancouver. I watched that video just recently. I thought it was incredible. So talk about, and part of the thing I find interesting with the whole Dragon's Den experience is, the kind of really, unless they do an update, which in that case they did, but the update was giving you the money, right? What did you use the $25,000 for afterwards? What was kind of your execution plan?
For sure. So it's super interesting. So funny enough, I didn't know Arlene was coming to my school that day or anything that was going on. The producers wanted it to be a complete surprise. So I remember like my parents were like all on me to make sure like my hair was cut. And I'm like, why is everyone like, I knew something was happening, like some sort of CB, like the producers were coming, but I didn't think Arlene was going to be there. Yeah. And they actually showed the 15-minute episode to my whole school before it went on TV, like a week or a couple days before it went on TV. And for me, I was like, I hadn't seen it. So I'm sitting in the front with my two best friends and I'm watching it for the first time. And like you said, it's an hour more than an hour and a half I was in there, and they cut it to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, that didn't happen that way. And I'm like, that's not the right order. And I'm watching it and I'm taking it in for the first time. I've never seen myself.
You've never
present.
seen it. Oh my God.
So I was just like completely blown away. And then I didn't even know Arlene was there at that point. So I'm already like, oh my God, what's going on? And then she comes up on stage. So that memory was pretty crazy. I was in 8th grade. Like I didn't know like what was going on. But in terms of like how I use the funds, so how everything worked with Arlene was, it was kind of this like part of the deal was her first right of refusal on my next 2 business ventures,
which was a smart move.
Yeah, it was really interesting. So, the app was kind of in the place that it was, and I was presenting new ideas, and kind of the idea for the money was to be able to use it for some of these new ideas to kind of help hire people to help me develop the app or market or whatever it was. To be completely honest with you, and I have nothing against Arlene, I think she just got very inundated with all of her responsibilities, whether it was between the people on Dragon's Den she invested in, her own venture capital and marketing fund, and then all the charitable work that she's done.
Yes.
I think she got quite busy, and we kept a really strong relationship. I did a video for one of her Enactus presentations where she was keynoting. But after about a year of working with different people from her team, the last person, I think at the end of her turn, the person from her team was like, listen, I'm resigning. I don't want to do this job anymore. I don't know who my replacement is going to be, but I wish you the best, Aanikh. And there was never a replacement, and I never ended up actually hearing from her team. And at that point, I was already kind of on my way of wanting to do other stuff. So, I don't have any ill will towards Arlene. I think she's an incredible entrepreneur, an incredible woman doing a lot of great things. But I guess the bridge kind of just slowly dissipated as time went on. And, I think it was all for the best. Like I ended up being able to focus on school, which was, I think, really important. I was kind of on this crossroads of spend more time on business and less time on school. But luckily, with the way things worked, I could really hone in on school, and that gave me the opportunity to eventually end up going to Stanford University, which I think was incredibly formative for where I'm at now.
Yeah, so talk about that experience. I've had a few entrepreneurs on the program. Some of them, I'm just trying to think, our youngest, definitely not, maybe 25. You definitely beat him. Jake, he started the movement. And some of these entrepreneurs are super into school. Some of them, just screw school. I don't want to do it. I'm sure, especially if you went to Stanford and you're hanging around the Silicon Valley bubble, there's definitely some strong opinions on education. What motivated you to kind of follow that path? And kind of to continue and pursue school as opposed to these other business ideas? Because where I'm coming from, and I'm just kind of like trying to put myself in your shoes, it's totally understandable that the $25,000 and you kind of starting all these businesses and trying to figure it out, that like that's what an entrepreneur does, right? Constantly tries to find the next opportunity. And so and that the Dragon's Den, if anything, was definitely a really great commercial for you, for your personal brand, for kind of your next. That's how I found about TrueFan. And so what was the motive behind pursuing that kind of more formal education and going out to the U.S.?
For sure, yeah. I'm there's no hiding it. I'm of Indian descent. My grandfather, my family immigrated to Canada in 1908, and my grandfather, he was born in India because his grandfather immigrated to Canada, but his mother decided to go back to India. He walked 5 miles to go to school every single day. He educated himself, got a master's degree, and became a teacher in Canada. All of his children, so my mom and her siblings are all educated. And I think one of the things I just grew up, everyone, all my aunts and uncles have master's degrees, whether it's in teaching, whether it's in, being a doctor or a lawyer. And the interesting thing is my family was incredibly supportive, but I think education to me was always just something like, I'm going to go to college and I can do really great entrepreneurial stuff at college, but it's, no one can ever take away, the college experience in terms of how it impacts your personality, your social skills, your ability to be in a new environment and in a new place and make friends. And on the flip side, at the end of the day, no one can take away a degree from you. That's something that you earned, and that's something that you'll forever have to your name. Now, it's funny, I'm saying this because I never actually finished my degree. I did 2 years. Yeah, I did 2 years at Stanford.
We were setting this up for this whole end. Now I started TrueFan.
And then about 2 years in, or halfway through my second year, Swish reached out to me. Swish is my co-founder. And he reached out and he said, "Hey, Aanikh, I have this idea for this product. It's based on all this experience that I've had in the marketing world and, you know, where I've killed it. And I'd love for you to be my co-founder. I'd love for you to start the company with me." And, you know, and the rest has been the last 2.5 years of my life. But I think in terms of this pro-college debate, I think college is amazing for people that have entrepreneurial spirit, but don't have a direct idea of exactly where they want to put it. I have a lot of friends that are like that and have actually been able to use the colleges as phenomenal resources to actually grow those businesses. Whether it's finding a professor to be a mentor, whether it's leveraging a club and the connections of alumni in the club to get meetings or in front of venture capitalists. I think that's where college really shines, is it helps give you a bit of the resources that you need. And I do know some people, some good friends that never went to college, whether they're creatives that kind of do YouTube and their own branding, or they're entrepreneurs themselves. I think they at that point had something that was working really well for them, and it was the opportunity cost of saying, okay, do I drop this now and go to college, or do I continue to see this through? And then, you know, I can always start college at 22, 23 if that's something that I want to do later on in my life. So I think it really depends on the position that you're at and kind of what your goal is with kind of what your current project is. That's kind of how I look at the debate.
Yeah, I think you nailed that. I think it's 100% about having self-awareness in regards to where you are and what's best for you. I definitely think, especially with COVID now, and I think especially in the U.S. with the cost of college these days, I think there's a great debate that there should and hopefully will be an alternative route to get a formal education for a less expensive cost. However, I do think that it totally depends on the person. And I think saying everyone should go to college or nobody should go to college, I think both of those are the wrong answer. So your co-founder reached out. He found you. How did he find you, actually?
Yeah, so it's a funny story. So Swish and I first met in 2015. There was this award. It was called Canada's Top 20 Under 20. And it was this, just long story short, this national award that recognizes 20 people under the age of 20. So Swish and I won the same year. And we were like roommates at the event, and we just hung out a bunch, and we just got along super, super well. He's a year older than me, so he was in his final year of high school, and I was in 11th grade. And we just got along super well. So that's where we first met. Swish graduated, he went to University of Toronto, and then he co-founded and sold a wearable tech company, moved to New York, worked for a VC there, and then co-founded Dunk Media, which is a basketball-related media company. So he went off and kind of just killed it. And we always stayed in touch, you know, whether it's through Instagram or Facebook, really quickly. And when we first met, we always thought, hey, we should start a business together one day. It'd be awesome. And we never actually did, just because our kind of paths diverged. But luckily, summer of 2017, we ran into each other at a hotel lobby, literally in Vancouver. My basement, so I'm from Vancouver. My basement flooded. My whole basement flooded. So I had to stay somewhere. So the insurance company put us up in a hotel. And I'm literally in the lobby waiting for my family to go to dinner. And I just see Swish walking across the lobby. And I just yell at him, like, Swish. And he sees me. And we just like give each other a big hug. We haven't talked in person since we met back in 2015. It's now 2017. Catch up like nothing's changed. And he invited me to kind of go to the event that he was at there, and we reconnected, and we kept staying in touch. And, you know, from that summer to around November, December of that year, where he had the idea for TrueFan and, you know, reached out to me.
Talk about a series of events going in your favor.
Yeah.
Your basement flooded, so you ran into him at a hotel lobby. That's nuts. And so you said, so to be clear, you dropped out of Stanford. Am I correct about that?
Stanford's really cool. So there's you can go on a leave of absence, and then you can then go on what's called discontinued. So discontinued means that you're off your leave. So it means that you've stopped, but there's no penalty to resume. I think in other universities, when you drop out, you would have to reapply to the university as if you had never been there before, you know, as if you were a new incoming student. With Stanford, when you go discontinued, you do have to say, hey, I'd like to come back, you know, show that you're financially capable to do so. Unless you were on financial aid before, then you have to sort that out. But you can continue. So I do at some point in my life want to finish my formal education. I don't know when. Obviously, things with TrueFan are going really well, and then after that, there might be interesting opportunities. I don't know, but I do know that Stanford has a very, very warm and strong place in my heart and in kind of my development as a person. And I'll always, think very positively of it. And at some point, I do want to say that I am a Stanford graduate.
Yeah. So you just and keep the family tradition going.
Yeah, 100%.
So okay. So you meet your co-founder Swish in Vancouver, and you said Swish is he Canadian?
Yes, he's Canadian.
And, okay,
yeah.
and he spent some time in New York, and then you originally found the company in Vancouver. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so first and foremost, if you lived in Palo Alto for a little bit, right, at Stanford, and Swish lives in New York, lived in New York for a period of time, you guys are both Canadian. And I have a bunch of follow-up questions I'll get to later on, but why didn't you just go to Silicon Valley and start TrueFan? Or why didn't you just go to New York or Los Angeles or some nice place with nice weather?
Great question. Vancouver summers, man.
Now, to be fair, Vancouver is one of my favorite cities in the world, and I actually think I could live there, but I'm just curious about why you didn't jump the boat.
For sure. So, as I mentioned, Swish is Canadian, I'm Canadian. We both feel very strongly about Canadian business and Canadian entrepreneurship.
I love it.
And we both feel very strong about the fact that we want people, young, successful people, whether you're studying at Stanford or you did what Swish did and you killed it, sold your company and were working in New York, that, some sort of storyline to say, hey, you can go back to Canada and be successful. You don't have to start in New York or Chicago or LA or, the Valley. You can do it in Vancouver. You can do it in Toronto. You can do it in wherever city is your home. And Canada can support you in that. That's something that Swish and I were very proud of. I grew up in Vancouver, and Hootsuite was that kind of company.
Yeah, I interviewed Ryan. Yeah, Ryan's awesome.
Yeah, he's an advisor in TrueFan. He's been a mentor to Swish and I personally. I was a part of the Next Big Thing, which was their first youth incubator when I was 12. Or sorry, not when I was 12, sorry. After I got accepted on Dragon's Den, so when I was 14, 15.
Did that become the League of Innovators?
It did, yeah. It turned into LOI, which Swish is on the board for now. So funny how things connect and interweave, man.
Yeah.
But, so that was a really big motivator for us to say, we can grow a very large and successful business here in Canada. And we want to give an example to young Canadians to say that just because you want to be a successful entrepreneur doesn't mean you have to go to the Valley or New York. So that's kind of why we decided to start in Canada. And Vancouver specifically was because Ryan gave us free office space out of the Hootsuite office. So we started TrueFan kind of the first time we were all together working out of an office space was in Vancouver. But we were working on kind of part of the company for 6 months prior to Vancouver, all remote. Me from Silicon Valley, Swish from New York, and Toronto, kind of back and forth. And then Scott, who's our chief growth officer now, but one of the kind of founding members of the team, he was in Ottawa. So we were kind of everywhere, but we all consolidated in Vancouver. I think it was August of 2018.
So you started remote before remote was cool. Or needed. And so I love it. That is exactly the answer I wanted to hear from you. So it seems like you, just based off of your previous ventures, and I think this is where Dragon's Den really helped you. You had connections as a result of it, and you when you began to start TrueFan and you had your first office, you got office space for free from Ryan, and I just think that's great. And I think that is kind of if you look at your path and journey as an entrepreneur, it's basically a series of building blocks. And I feel like it would have been harder to start TrueFan if you didn't start under the radar, and so I love that. But I'm curious in terms of the raising money aspect.
Yeah.
How did that go for you? Because it seems like raising money at any age is hard, especially if you started this in 2017, you're 22 now, you couldn't drink in the US. What's that like?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So I'll give, all the credit I'd really say is, for our first round and for all our subsequent rounds is really to Swish. I've learned a tremendous amount from him in terms of how to build a strong network. From when we started, like I said, 2.5 years ago to now, I'm still learning tips and how he manages to do it, because I've never seen anyone have both the intent and just, the skill and passion to make sure that, his network is, constantly feel supported from him, whether it's connecting to people, calling people, texting people. He's phenomenal at that. And I think that really helped us when it came to raising money. Our first round was entirely through angels. It was through, I think, 13 or 14 angel investors. And, all of them were people that Swish had been able to nurture strong relationships with. And when they obviously knew he was starting a company, they saw the team, Swish, myself, Scott, some of the other people that we had, Tim at the start, Trevor at the start. These are people that, these individuals that, Swish were connected with and had built strong relationships with, thought, could be successful. So that was incredibly helpful. And then I think in terms of the subsequent fundraising that we've done, it's funny. Again, the world is incredibly small. We got an introduction to Bruce Croxon's
round 13.
Round 13 capital. Yeah. So when we first met, when we met Bruce, he remembered me. And one of Swish's personal mentors is really good friends with Bruce, Michael Hyatt, who's an advisor and true fan. So, Bruce was getting, he remembered me, and, he had heard very good things about Swish. So, again, it's kind of like you said, I would have been harder to do True Fan without Dragon's Den. I think that definitely helped. Swish's, ability to nurture relationships with people like Michael really helped, in that aspect as well. So I think it kind of created a perfect storm. And then once you get a few people behind you and you can start to build, some key metrics and some milestones, it's not that hard to raise money. Because it's like, hey, we have a business. This is what we've done in the last 6 months. This is what we're going to do in the next 6 months. Or so we did in the last year. This is what we're going to do in the next 6 months. I think it's easier because it's less so, early investors are really betting on the team and the founders, less so on the idea.
Yeah, because so many people.
Pivoting is such a common thing.
Yeah, bet on
You're really
the
just betting on. Exactly. And we were fortunate. We had a great team. We had someone like Swish, who was a CEO, who's really phenomenal at nurturing that network and building it, which really helped us, throughout the entirety of our company. So I think that's kind of how we got our feet and our footing. And obviously we still have do a really good job of nurturing the network now. But in terms of fundraising now, it is definitely easier because we've been around for 2.5 years. We've been able to, get good milestones, build good relationships, get press, et cetera, et cetera.
And did you have any rejections when fundraising, especially in the early days, in regards to your age? Did that turn but did your age specifically turn people off?
I don't think not to our face.
So no one was like, you can't drink, I'm not funding you.
No, definitely not. I think maybe it was like, we don't like the space that you guys are in, or we don't invest in such early stage companies, we don't invest pre-revenue. Those were some of the more common answers, I'd say. Less so we don't think you guys would be good founders. Yeah. Now, maybe they felt that, but they hid it under another answer. I don't know. Canadians are usually pretty nice, so maybe not.
Those sounds like all Canadian VCs, because I was talking to someone who was saying in Canada the hardest thing you'll get from a VC is a no. It's always like, check back on us. We'll track progress.
Yeah, no, I know. And then they're kind of just stringing you along sometimes. And I have a mentor and a friend who says, set the round in the US and then fill the round in Canada, meaning that it's easier to get that first initial person out in the US to kind of take that risk or set that valuation that you want, and then it's easier to fill the round in Canada once they know a big firm in the US is behind it. So no knock on Canadian VC though.
Fear of missing out,
Yeah, but exactly, create a little FOMO.
Coming up, my conversation with Aanikh Kler continues. We'll be right back after a brief word from our sponsor. This episode of The Ones Who Succeed is brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning platform with thousands of classes in business, marketing, technology, design, and more. You can take classes in social media marketing, video editing, entrepreneurship, you name it, they've got it. So whether you're trying to deepen your professional skill set, start a side hustle, or just explore a new passion, Skillshare is there to keep you learning and thriving. So, ladies and gentlemen, here is the call to action. Skillshare is offering the Ones Who Succeed listeners 2 months of unlimited access to thousands of classes, all for free. To sign up, go to Skillshare.com/succeed. Again, that's Skillshare.com/succeed. That link is how they know the Ones Who Succeed sent you to start your first 2 months now. You can find that link in the description of this podcast, and it would be awesome if you can support our show by supporting our sponsors. So one last time, visit Skillshare.com/succeed to start your first 2 months of Skillshare Premium today. And thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring the show. Welcome back to The Ones Who Succeed. I'm Campbell Barron. I hope you're having a great day today. And I'm about halfway through my conversation with Aanikh Kler. He's the 22-year-old co-founder of TrueFan, so we're going to jump right back into that conversation. If when you're kind of building this company and you're hiring people, you eventually made this decision to pack up shop from Vancouver and move to Toronto. I'm from Toronto. I grew up in the U.S., but I'm from here and I live here now. It's not shocking why you would do this. Toronto, the tech scene in the city is booming. There's a statistic in 2019, more new tech jobs were created in Toronto than in Seattle, Washington, D.C., and San Francisco combined. So it's definitely a growing ecosystem, and it seems like it's the tech hub of Canada, and hopefully it will be a larger than life tech hub in the coming years. But in regards to your journey in TrueFan, why did you decide to do that? It's not like you couldn't build a business in Vancouver. Hootsuite's doing really well. They're a unicorn, I'm pretty sure.
Or Clio. They're like a multi-billion-dollar company now.
Right, yeah. And so it's not like tech doesn't exist in Vancouver, and it is closer to Silicon Valley in general. So why did you decide to make that move?
Yeah, I think there's a couple reasons. I'm from Vancouver. My family's from Vancouver. I'm definitely a West Coast person. So when we moved to Toronto, it was the very first time I was coming out east, like ever, for a significant period of time. But we raised money from Round 13 Capital. So moving out here and building a closer relationship with them was very helpful. Majority of Swish's network was based out in the East Coast. So him being the CEO, working a lot on the marketing and the sales side, it was easy for him to kind of set up meetings or kind of get that first initial phone call or whatever it may be if we were out east. And then, as you mentioned, I love Vancouver and I definitely want to help grow Vancouver's tech scene. I hope that TrueFan will get big enough to where the day we can have a Vancouver office and a Toronto office. But most of the leaders of the company, if we're having a meeting with Uber Canada, it's in Toronto. And I think, as much as a Zoom call is great, nothing's like going in office, meeting someone, having a conversation with them, putting a real human, face to face. It does help close deals. And as an early stage company, you get one pilot with a large, enterprise, and that's enough to, help you fund your round and survive, for a little bit longer. So, from a strategic perspective, I think it just made sense to be here, for the early stages. And to kind of grow, our reputation as a company, even our and grow our reputations as, entrepreneurs. But I definitely believe, that part of my goal in life is to help grow the Vancouver tech scene as I get older, because it is something I'm incredibly passionate about, and Vancouver as a city is something I care deeply about.
Yeah. No, it totally makes sense. And before COVID, did you have like an office in Toronto?
Yeah, we were working out at the Round 13 office space for I think like 8-9 months, quite a bit of time. And then we were part of the Ryerson DMZ program. So we did that from the start of January until COVID hit, and then we've been working from home, working remote since. And
is your whole team out here in Toronto? Do you still have some Vancouver?
The whole team is out here now. It's kind of dispersed. Like a lot of our devs are from the Hamilton area. Then they work out in Hamilton. Swish and I are from the core downtown Toronto. Our head of growth marketing, he is in downtown Toronto a lot, but he's actually from Peterborough, so that's where he is right now. We kind of have everyone kind of scattered across the greater Toronto area. But yeah, for the most part, when we were at the DMZ, everyone was kind of there, in downtown.
Yep. I think that's awesome. And as you continue to grow and scale, and hopefully once we kind of push through this COVID wave, we'll be able to you'll be able to open up a official TrueFan office, HQ, worldwide headquarters.
I'd be excited for that. And
I think it's awesome. And so I was reading this article, and I read it wrong, but what I thought I read was essentially TrueFan has been acquired by SocialRank. And then I looked at it again. I was like, oh, wait a minute. TrueFan acquired Social Rank.
Yeah.
You guys acquired a company, and it's just incredible. It's such an entrepreneurial success story. I love it. So talk about that. Talk about acquiring a company. Yeah, I'm just really curious to find out.
Absolutely. So when we started TrueFan, Social Rank was an amazing, incredible audience analytics platform, and it still was. When right up to the point where we acquired it, and now our product is the Social Rank product. It has a lot of TrueFan DNA in it, but we still call it Social Rank because the founders of that company did such an incredible job. Michael and Alex, they're both actually advisors now in TrueFan. But what we had found is that we had built a really phenomenal solution, but one of the areas we were missing was follower audience analytics. So we looked at a lot of your engagement, but we weren't looking at who your followers were. Social Rank did that at like the best level. And we had built a really good relationship. Again, I think it's all relationships and networking. One of Swish's really good friends was really good friends with Alex, so he put us in contact at the start of 2019, and we got to build a relationship with Alex throughout 2019. And then in August, I had been in Vancouver for the summer. I had come back to Toronto, and I was like, hey, I should just hit up Alex and kind of see how they're doing. He's been super nice and helpful for us at the start. And at that point, he was like, hey, we're kind of sunsetting Social Rank because, we're starting a new business. It's our moonshot idea. We're going after LinkedIn. And I actually think they're going to do a really incredible job with what they've built with Upstream.
Oh, that's really cool.
But, they were sunsetting it. And we're like, hey, there seems to be a lot of synergy here in terms of your clients, our clients, what their needs are, what our clients' needs are. There might be a way that we can figure out a way to kind of bring the companies together somehow. So long story short, we were able to acquire Social Rank. The deal really kind of got started, middle of September, really started at middle to end of September. And everything was finalized by end of November. So it was a 2-month turnaround. Probably the craziest 2 months of my life in terms of getting everything sorted, legal wise, and everything else that's involved with acquiring a company. Swish and I have never done this before. No one on our team had ever done it before. But luckily we had really good mentors and advisors, and we brought a really great legal team on to help with it. So we were able to get it done, and it was super exciting. And I think the interesting thing is it's a stat that I think a VC that we were talking to told us is like 70% of acquisitions fail within the first year because they don't know how to properly manage the technology and come up with a solution. So I think we were very, very poignant and specific with like, we're acquiring Social Rank for this purpose. And this is how we're going to, and we've kind of stuck with that mantra throughout. And I think it's allowed us to be, successful with it. It's a little bit over 6 months that we've had it now. Every month in 2020, we've grown 10% except for March. So that's really something we're incredibly proud of as a company. That 10% month over month growth is something that, we were aspiring to at the start of the year, and we're very proud that we've been able to hit it despite being in one of a global pandemic and one of the, world's worst economic recessions. So, I think just being very specific and deliberate with, our focus towards how we wanted to integrate the companies, how we wanted to do it from a branding, from a product perspective, I think has helped us succeed. But it was a whirlwind, man. I've learned so much. I feel like I'm a part-time lawyer after that experience. But it was really cool.
Yeah, I think that's. I think when you're going through a process like an acquisition, not like I've been through a process like an acquisition, but I can only imagine the amount of paperwork and kind of red tape that kind of is involved in the whole process. So when you're hiring people, or even in a situation like when you're acquiring a company, I'm just fixated on your age because, most people your age are in college and you're running a company, and obviously with Swish and your team to support you, but I think that's really inspiring. So have you ever had any issues with employees kind of doing a double take, or is everyone aware that you guys are these young entrepreneurs and you're kind of kicking ass at this point?
Yeah, I think I think there's like a 2-part answer to that question, right? I think everyone's definitely aware that, I'm 22 and Swish is 23. We don't hide it. Despite the fact I could grow a big beard, I usually don't.
Disguise yourself.
But when we've done hiring, it especially for senior roles, right? It's like, I think I think if someone's coming in and they go, you know what, I feel weird working for a 22-year-old or working for a 33-year-old. One, we definitely don't want to create an environment or as a company where you feel like you're working for someone. Mm-hmm. We work together. We're a team. I think someone who I really look up to is a friend we built through an accelerator program we're part of called Stadia, and he was the head of Tesla in Japan for a couple of years. And he said that, I forget who, I think it essentially the quote was, everyone sweeps the floors. And I think that's really important to me because it's like, no matter what team you're a part of, no one is above doing anything. Meaning like, every part of the team, whether it's a founder or whether it's a new intern, should be comfortable doing any job that they're required to help the company succeed. So I think if someone comes in with an idea of being like, I'm not comfortable taking direction from a 22-year-old or a 23-year-old, then I don't think they'd be a good fit for the company anyways.
You don't want them on your team at that point.
Yeah, and maybe secretly there's been a few people that have felt that way, and maybe it came across in other ways, but I think we've been able to source really incredible talent across the board, whether it's on a sales side, on a marketing side, on a product side, because people are excited. We're a young team, we're an excited team, we have a lot of passion, and I think that really exudes when you meet us and you talk to us. And our vision is to democratize social data. Our platform now is poised for the middle market of business, small to medium enterprises, to give them access to data that they never had before. This type of data was only available to Fortune 1,000 companies spending, up close to $10,000 a month. We're offering this power and intuitive platform for $24 a month. And I think that vision and that kind of excitement that the team exudes, I think is very contagious for people that are looking to be a part of a kind of a young, vibrant startup team and company culture. And I think that's helped us bring in really phenomenal talent. I think everyone on our team is incredible. I think they could go off and do their own businesses if they wanted to. At any point in their life, they're all amazing founder mentality people. And I think that's what makes our team really special.
Early stage startup. Yeah, I mean, anyone who kind of comes on that roller coaster journey is kind of signing up for a roller coaster journey. So I want to pivot gears here, kind of talk to you about your opinions on some up and coming industries and just tech in general.
For sure.
So one of the things that I've been really interested in is the idea of a platform shift. And I mean, I think you handled this really well, right? Your first app under the radar on Dragon's Den, or your first app that I'm aware of, was an iOS mobile application, right? Mm-hmm. It benefited from being on the App Store. I read that it even surpassed Angry Birds at one point for a period of time in Canada, and that's incredible. And that's kind of the benefit of building a mobile app, which is if it goes well, you kind of have the Apple ecosystem or the Google Play ecosystem, just in general, to kind of springboard your growth. Now, there are a lot of smart people who say the golden age of the mobile app store is dead. And there's no point in building a mobile app anymore. It's just too competitive, and there's either some people say there's a platform shift coming back from mobile, coming from mobile to web, and kind of web 3.0 is taking place, and it's going to be AI driven, etc. What are your opinions on that? TrueFan is a website. It doesn't have an app to my knowledge. It makes sense that it's a website. But what's your opinion? I mean, the first question is, what's your opinion on the rise or fall of the mobile app store and mobile apps in 2020? Thoughts?
Yeah, I think, the point about it's an incredibly competitive marketplace, that's true, right? As technology has scaled, technology to help build technology has scaled. Mm-hmm. So it is easier to make an app now than it was in, 2015. On the flip side, though, we see apps blowing up and becoming incredibly successful. Look at Headspace. Headspace is $1 billion company that started from an app.
I met Rich. I interviewed their founder. He's really
cool. That's incredible.
I'm a fan.
And that wouldn't have happened if Headspace was just a website, because it's hard to carry your laptop around when you want to meditate, but you always have your phone in your pocket. Yeah. Right. So I think the idea that, hey, people are tired of apps, they're not going to download apps. Was I personally downloading more apps 5 years ago than I am now? Yes. But that's also just because of my daily workflow. I think if you're going to build a really incredible product and the goal of that product is ease of use, for that specific niche, it makes sense to have an app, right? Like if I'm building a meditation app, it's easy for me to take my phone to a room, set it down, and play it and listen to my, headphones that are plugged into it all day. It's hard to do that with my laptop. If I'm building enterprise software or business software, I'm not as concerned about building an app because very few of my customers are going to be trying to check their social data analytics on their phone. They're usually going to be on their laptop. So I think it's really specific to what you're trying to build, right? If even if apps were saturated, I think they can still blow up really quickly. Like if I went on Dragon's Den again and I pitched the app and I was a 14-year-old kid and Dragon's Den had the same viewership that it did now back then, I'm sure the app would do really well. Would it hit top 2? Maybe, I don't know. Would it hit top 10? Probably. And I think that's still enough to say that apps still have a very relevant place in the workplace. And that's in North America. When you look at Asia and emerging economies, apps are blowing up.
Yeah, and that's a very smart
huge.
point. Yeah, because they're just catching up to us, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
To your point, right? Like they're catching up. They're kind of building their consumer habits, and mobile usage has skyrocketed, and internet penetration has skyrocketed. So building apps for global, if you're trying to be a startup and be a global startup, right, apps are still a phenomenal place to do so. That environment is helpful. It is helpful that Google knows how to do all your reviews and Apple knows how to do your reviews, and if you do well, Apple can feature you and that can change the entire trajectory of your company. Like it's every time someone buys an iPhone or buys a Google phone, the App Store is instantly installed, which means that you've just given someone the ability to access your product without you having to do any marketing. They could stumble upon it or if it's featured. So I still think apps have a really important place. But again, I think the day of everyone was just building an app to build an app and hope that it would succeed, those days are gone. You're not just going to have a dumb, lucky app that goes, that does well unless, a celebrity uses it and promotes it. But I don't think everyone needs to have an app, but I think for some business ventures, it still makes a ton of sense to build an application for mobile.
Well said. If you were starting another company today, and it can't involve TrueFan or the industry you're in, data, social media, aside from that, what spaces intrigue you? Where would you look? I don't need a business idea, but what are some disruptable industries that you see from the crazy perspective that is 2020?
eSports. I'm wearing a FaZe shirt right now.
Because you are an investor in FaZe?
Yeah, but I love eSports. I've been in love with eSports since I was 12 years old. My first class at Stanford was called The Rhetoric of Gaming. It was my first English class I took. I wrote a paper that year on why esports gamers should be considered athletes.
Interesting.
My prof loved it. And this was in 2016. This was before esports. This is before Ninja, before everything actually got mainstream and everyone wanted a piece of esports. I think it's growing really fast. So I think there's a lot of things broken with it. I have a friend, Adam. He's building a phenomenal startup called Edge to really help solve some of the payment issues that exist in gaming and contractual issues between teams and players and tournament organizations and players. And I think they're going to do a phenomenal job. Esports really, really excites me. When I'm done with TrueFan, I ideally would want to do something in esports.
Okay.
It's a big passion of mine, and I still think there's so much going on in that space, and I think it's only going to continue to grow. And we saw that with COVID, right? It's the only industry that boomed, other than food delivery, was gaming, and delivery of general things as well, like Amazon. But gaming boomed. So many more people are watching. So many people are viewing, and I think gaming's only been on the come up. I've been saying this since I was 12, and I convinced my mom to let me spend time playing video games. To when I was 16 and I wrote that paper, to when I was 20 and I was doing consulting, to now when I'm just a fan of the industry and I try to help out friends and advisors and mentors when I can in the space. But I think there's so much more in the esports realm that's been untouched and uncaptivated that I think will only continue to grow. Well said.
And my last question, actually 2 more questions. What keeps you up at night?
I think if something's keeping me up at night, it's because I don't feel like we built a proper process to give the best experience for our customers. Again, if someone's going to even pay $24 a month, I want them to, if someone's going to show faith and trust in our product, I want that faith and trust to be rewarded. I think that's how you build really good products. I think that's how you build really good companies. So that might be one thing that's keeping me up at night. Or the other thing would just be like my family. I have a mom who raised me. I have a younger brother who's just starting university this year. Elderly grandparents. I'm very close to all my aunts and uncles, my cousins. My girlfriend's from Vancouver, so I don't get to be with her all the time. So if I'm usually staying up at night, it's because I'm thinking about them or I'm talking about them. Other than stuff with TrueFan, my family's my number one priority in my life. It always has been and always will be. So that's probably the number one thing, and then the number two thing might be something related to work. Fair
enough. And this is a question I like to ask a lot of entrepreneurs, because it's very curious to hear their answer. And I have my own theories. But when you reflect on your kind of journey as an entrepreneur, you're still quite young. I'm sure you have a few more companies than you at least. Do you think you were born an entrepreneur?
I think there's nature versus nurture. I think, my whole family are professionals, meaning like dentists, lawyers, doctors, engineers, bankers, whatever. There's not really someone in my immediate family that I can turn to and said, oh, I learned entrepreneurship from them. Maybe I was. When I was 10, I invested in the stock market for the first time because I was fascinated with the idea that I could go to soccer practice and come home and make money. Like, to me, that was like the most like mind-shattering idea. I read David Chilton's Wealthy Barber. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, which I still think was probably the most formative book I ever read in my life. So maybe, I don't know. Maybe if I wasn't exposed to those types of things or those types of thinking, but I did seek it out a lot. I think it's a mix. I think I had it in me, but I think it had to be nurtured. I think I could have easily, strayed into being a banker, or maybe a dentist or something, or a doctor or a lawyer. My mom's a lawyer. I looked up to her my entire life. Maybe could have been a good lawyer. I just think that my natural interest was really into the entrepreneurial field, and it was nurtured. Even though my parents and my mom wasn't interested in that, she supported me. And I think that allowed me to grow that side until that side took over. Now I don't think I could ever really do anything else.
Wonderful. Well, Aanikh, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. This was awesome.
Thank you, Campbell. This was super fun, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to invite me out and interview me for the podcast. And honestly, man, like you're killing it. You're doing a phenomenal job. I was super impressed when I read everything, about you, your story, the types of people that you interview. So I feel very honored that you would want me on the show.
Well, I appreciate that, and you're killing it. Thank you. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks, man.
Aanikh Kler, one of the ones who succeed. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this show, it would be amazing if you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us out. Or why not tell a friend? That also helps new listeners discover the show. I really appreciate it. If you want to see clips from the pod and stay up to date with what I'm working on, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Campbell J. Barron. And my YouTube channel is my name, Campbell Barron. You've made it to the end of the show. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Campbell Barron, and I'll be back in no time.